Well, welcome to the podcast. Yes, here's your host, Rob Elliott. This time, I know I normally go all over the world at silly times of the morning when I'm recording, but I got lazy today. I've gone just down the road from Sydney to Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. I have a lovely lady who's originally from South Africa. She's a psychologist. She is an entrepreneur. She does many things. And would you believe, which goes against everything Australians ever believe, she's opened a non-alcohol cellars, which we're going to get into that. Welcome to the show, Kirsten Chalmers. How are you?
Oh, thank you. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just really glad to be here. Thanks, Rob.
That's no problem at all. Now, we mentioned in the intro, you're originally from South Africa. Where are you from?
So, South Africa, probably the most boring part, Johannesburg. So that's not the fun part like Cape Town or Durban, where the water is beautiful. But, smack bang in the middle, the Highveld, as it was called. And, grew up in a probably upper class sort of suburb. My mum's actually German, so I went to the German school, sort of an international school. And then, stayed there until I was about early 30s. My husband and I came out.
So you met your husband in South Africa?
Husband's originally from the UK. Very little when he went to South Africa. He was only 5 years old, so mostly South African, I'd call him. And we'd separately been to Australia for visits and both loved it and thought, before we have kids, this is during and after the good old apartheid years. It was just not a good time to consider having kids in South Africa. We didn't think so anyway. So we decided to make a big move before settling down, as it were.
So did you do your psychology education, all that over in South Africa, or was that when you came here?
So the undergrad was there. So I did up until my honours years there and worked in corporate, actually. So at the time, I wasn't ready to be a psychologist. So I felt it a little bit daunting. So I thought, well, what do you do next? What do you actually do with a psychology degree? And really, I guess I got into recruitment and then human resources. So the company I worked for was Anderson Consulting back in the day. Now it's called Accenture and Deloitte's. And so those just did the corporate thing for a while and loved it. I mean, I did love the corporate life. Got into a management role at 23. When I came over here, I pretty much approached the same organizations, landed up at Accenture again. And my hubby's a bit of an entrepreneur himself. So he was starting his own business while I was keeping things afloat. And within 6 months, we decided we are never leaving.
That happens to a lot of people that come to Australia.
Oh, it's just gorgeous. Honestly, it is the lucky country.
Now, I'm going to ask you a very Australian question. When you're at university, what was more important, the study or the social life?
Oh, hell, the social life.
That's what I
And
like
the bar down the road. Bailey's, actually. I was actually talking to someone recently and she mentioned Bailey's in her drink and that threw me right back. There was a place down the road near our university and can you imagine drinking Bailey's at the middle of the day? Yeah, that was me. And then I'd go to uni, then I'd go to class. I can understand that, but
for a whole heap of different reasons.
It was good fun.
So when you were with your husband, you decided you're going to come to Australia. What was the trigger to decide first to leave South Africa and then to pick a country that is similar to South Africa in many ways, but very different?
Well, yes, the country decision was one up for debate in the family because having a German mother, she was like, why don't you go to Europe? You've got a European passport. But again, I go back to the fact that I had visited and I have an uncle and he was in Australia. So it just kind of felt like I was going to family in a way. I mean, I did have family in Europe as well, but I felt, English is my first language, even though I did speak German. It didn't feel like a homely language to me. I don't like winters. Interestingly, wasn't keen on Melbourne because of the cold weather. We had two places to consider for my husband's business, and that was either Sydney or Melbourne because they both had major ports and we were importing. And Sydney was too expensive, was the bottom line, and Melbourne had my uncle, so we came here. So the other question was, what was the reason for leaving, or that pivotal moment? It was actually not that huge. It was just, let's give it a go. It was not, it was kind of like, we can always come back. We've got a good life. How bad can it be? I guess sometimes you just make decisions easier for yourself by making them less intense. If you know you can come back, if you know you can rewrite your story, I think it's easier to make a big change.
Now, most of us only know the psychology side when it comes to business from the lady who plays the character in Billions. And, she sits there and she's just supposed to mentor everyone, but I think she does a whole heap of more things.
Yeah.
When you're in a role like that, how hard is it not to slip back into being a psychologist and actually be a person who's just there to do a job? Because you're trained to look at people and read people, but you're not there in that. You're there to do something totally different.
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm always growing and changing. So remember, I was in business before. So I think the psychology, so what happened was came to Australia and then got into business, climbed the corporate ladder, really understood the corporate ladder, had to do the whole, drinking at night thing and keeping up with the boys and all that. So then I actually did my master's only in my 30s. And so I think psychology is a portion of my life. It's sort of 10 years of my life. I don't know if I would say I'm more of a psychologist or more of an entrepreneur, but I think this background in psychology, reading people and understanding people and building relationships is not that different in sales. No. The rest is just fun. I don't have to worry about someone's mental health when I walk away. True. I can just say, how many bottles would you like with that?
Yes.
So it's different.
Before we get into the sacrilegious subject of a non-alcohol wine and spirits.
Yes, that dreaded talk.
That terrible talk. I'm going to ask you, what is the biggest difference between South African corporate world and business and Australian? Apart from we beat you in cricket all the time.
I think Australians are a lot softer. I think I would have come across fairly hard ass in the beginning. I had to learn to soften that.
I've heard that many times with South Africans.
I think Australians would consider what we consider to be determined, they'd consider to be rude.
Yes.
So you have to, I guess, assimilate to the country. And I think, I tend to throw myself in. So I tend to adopt everything as quickly as I can, maybe sort of chameleon style. And so I almost became, a good actor. And then I had to pull back and remember, I'm South African. And once I felt comfortable being me again, I guess that part emerged. But for a while, you take on everything. You learn every bit of lingo. I didn't understand. I remember driving to work one day and the traffic was cactus. And I was like, cactus? What is cactus? I was like, is that like a cacti? What does that mean? So there's a lot of little things. And also in Australia, interesting, although that's not different from South Africa, but, who's who in the zoo and who went to which university. So when I started recruiting for Accenture, I had to get to know the tier 1 universities. And so it was completely foreign. Every university was kind of new to me regardless. But here it was very much like, and the Wesley colleges and and the Melbourne universities. So that wasn't different. That's very similar, but it's just something that you have to learn in a new country all over again.
That's awesome. I did work with a South African boss who lost the room because of his manner.
Yes.
And when it was explained to him, he was deeply offended, but not offended by what people had said. He was offended that he had made people feel that way. Yeah,
I totally get that, because I would have felt the same. I would have thought, well, I'm not trying to be, I want to be likable. I want to be approachable, but I'm passionate. But it's just seen very differently, and you have to learn that.
And to his credit, he totally changed, and we found this warm-hearted boss underneath. Awesome. And he was a pleasure to work for after there. So we've gone down, 2 years ago, COVID hit. Let's just round it all out.
Yep.
Threw the world up, and a lot of businesses folded, a lot of businesses pivoted. Alcohol sales went through the roof.
Yes, I was a part of that originally.
Yes. Things changed, and then we came out of it. And then we went back into it, and we seem to have gone back into it in worse, as in lockdowns and rules and regulations, than we were the first time, because we really didn't know what was going on. And either you were very drunk one night in Melbourne and you decided to open a bottle shop online that sells non-alcoholic. Now, can you tell us a story about how did you come to that? Did someone hit you on the head, or was it a dare, or
A couple
where
of
does
things.
this 0.0 Stellas come from?
A couple of things. Firstly, I was a little disillusioned in my psychology practice, having had to move from sort of face-to-face counseling to online. So I really didn't like it. That's the bottom line. I had a little therapy dog and we did great work together. And I could not translate that online. I didn't feel I was adding value. I felt sometimes like a babysitter because remember, I'm working with kids a lot, not just adults.
Yeah.
So I just thought I was, worse than Minecraft. I was just boring at best. And so I decided to take a break. I thought, you know what? COVID will blow over. How long can this stupid thing last anyway? That was back in the day. We thought that might actually happen. And I took a time off, and then I decided to take a break from alcohol because, as you say, I think in lockdown 1, I was trying really hard to drink Dan Murphy's out of business. And I just decided, well, if I'm going to take a time off mentally, I've got no reason to drink. I certainly can't drink socially. So let me just try this no alcohol thing. So I did it. And I guess that's where this epiphany came. So it was a crazy moment. Well, I guess, so fast forward 6 months, I'm now, not drinking at all. I'm sort of into the sober curious movement. What does that mean? I'm into the mindfulness movement. What is that all about? All these great people online talking about this wonderful new life. And I was like, yeah, it's actually pretty good. And then I sat down with my husband and I was like, I wonder whether this is a sign to change my business. Maybe we should start this new thing up. And he's pretty good actually, because he's an entrepreneur himself. He was like, okay, what did you have in mind? So literally in the space of a breakfast at a little local restaurant in Templestowe, we came up with the idea and the name. And I came back, I registered the name, I started a website and started looking at importing product, because I think the thing for me was not to try and reinvent what was already here, but to add to the arena. And I guess it is a whole learning experience that these things do taste good. In fact, I guess that's my mission, is to people who go, why would you drink non-alcoholic drinks? Which I totally get. I would have asked the same question myself.
Yes.
But I think when you get rid of the taste of alcohol, you can actually appreciate the flavors. It's a lot more complex these days than it used to be, particularly when you start sourcing high-end products. So I'm not talking about the stuff you'll find on the shelves of Coles. I'm talking about something that really does the trick in my mind.
So when you first decided with your husband you're going to do this, what was the biggest challenge you had when you first started, your very first month or so?
Do you know, it was probably nailing down the vision. I can be all over the place. When I want to do something, it's got to be everywhere and it's got to be soon. So I guess the idea was, well, who do you really want to be? You've got to get to know the players in the market. So now I knew the movement, I knew all the people that would potentially buy, but I didn't know who were the sellers and where that ranking sort of is. So, there's the online sellers, there's Dan Murphy's, who's got like a tiny little range as well. But there's also the bars and the restaurants and I guess when I knocked it all down, I realized that what I missed the most was going to a restaurant and being able to have a decent alternative, because that's the part I was struggling the most with. When I had because I promised myself a year off, and just to put it out there, I'm not anti-alcohol. I plan to still have the odd glass, no problem with that. But, I just wanted to commit to a promise I'd made to myself. And I told myself I'm going to do this a year. And so I just wanted to hang with my friends. And honestly, I had to look at the kiddie menu to find something to drink. And I found that frustrating, because we go to some really lovely restaurants. And to me, it was just a mark on them that they didn't have because they are good alternatives. We're talking about wines that have been de-alcoholized. So it's almost like, you know how you think of a coffee, you think, well, should the decaf be more expensive or less expensive? Well, depending whether you're a caffeine freak, I drink decaf, of course. You'd expect that, right? He's nodding. Oh,
next thing you're going to say you're a vegan.
I know, right? It's going from bad to worse. No, I haven't reached those levels yet.
Oh, that's good.
But just because it's been removed doesn't make it inferior. And that's why I didn't want to import anything that was a lookalike. It had to be from a winery, or, it had to be people that took their craft very seriously.
So why did you go for imported, not Australian?
I guess it was about, this is what, I guess when I originally had the idea, that's why I say narrowing down the vision was the hard part, because when I originally had the idea, A, I didn't know how much was on the market. B, I sort of thought it was just the stuff on the Coles shelves. And so I didn't really think that what I could do was just market the local market to restaurants. I guess there's a market for that. So anyone who's listening, go for that one. But I just thought I'd had to bring something new in to make it interesting to someone, or to appealing. I just felt that. And I needed something, to be honest, I didn't like anything local.
That's fine. Yeah.
And so even the online sellers that are bringing in, I say that with the exclusion of beers. I think beers have nailed it. But the wines, I found that the ones that were being brought in already were the better ones anyway.
Yeah, if I refer back to that, a lot of my wife's friends, they're looking at the moment because they're on medication, they're not supposed to drink alcohol, but they're wanting to still have a drink. And they say they're struggling finding quality whites.
Yes.
There's a couple of good Shirazes out there, but the variety and everything else is limited. Especially
and the Moscato
the
or the Rose was almost zero, so that was one that we targeted. And the reds, I guess I don't like sweet drinks, so I was trying to stay away. In fact, even our sparkling, it says nectar, which is so disappointing. Actually, I should tell the guys in South Africa that's a wrong name, because it's actually not that sweet. So I've tasted everything first, and I guess I went with my palate. And look, South Africa, in terms of similarities to Australia, has got some really lovely wineries. If you've ever been or ever plan to go, wine is something that they know. And
the Australian palate is very similar. It's a dry palate. As we get older, our palate does get dry. I had the pleasure of working for Guinness Australasia for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And they had to make the Guinness more bitter in Australia, but to match the Australian palate.
That's interesting that you say that.
It's a smoother, softer stout. In Australia, it is a lot more bitter.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because I've done a lot of taste testing of beer, and look, I'm not a sommelier or beer, this is not my thing, but I did find, some of the non-alcoholic beers are quite bitter too. So they've obviously, they are the local ones, so they obviously know their market, and that's why, now I know why they're so bitter. Always wondered about that.
I've tasted some of the imported zeros and some of the Australian. I haven't found one that I would drink, but that's because I'm a person that needs a lot of taste.
Yes.
His wine and his beer. There is one that I spoke to actually the guy at Dan Murphy's, and they said, I think it's the Great Northern Zero, is the most popular in the store that I go to.
Interesting. Okay.
But in saying that, they said the taste is we're still, to quote him, a long way away from overseas. They seem to have really hit the mark. Now, a lot of people, if you went to their restaurant and you spoke to the owner, they would say, this is just a fad. What's in it for me? Because, people in business, they're not going to range your wine because it's feel good. They're going to range your wine or your spirits, we'll get onto that in a moment, because they sell.
Correct.
So there's a lot of people in business who listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, this is a brand new business that opened in May. How does Kirsten crack that? And what's your approach when you go to or speak to somebody who hasn't got any non-alcoholic beers or wines? You show them about your range. They're going to throw everything back at you.
Well, so given the fact that I am not a salesperson, I'm also know my limits. And so rather than going from bar to bar, club to club, restaurant to restaurant, I'm hooking up with the distributors who already have relationships. And so we've got a couple of distributors already who are basically just adding it as a new offering to their existing range. They know their clients already. And so they're learning. We're doing some marketing with them. They're learning through us, what the appeal is. And I guess your question might be, well, what is the appeal? So first of all, from a business perspective, drop per drop, even shots per shot, we're not expecting any decrease in price. So this is not a cheap option. This is going to be, in fact, the better option. I actually think in future people will actually go, it'll be actually more snobby to not have a wine. Honestly, that's the way I see it heading. And so it's going to be no different in terms of price point, in terms of what they're selling. But I think the difference is that it is a socially responsible thing to do, to be able to offer a non-alcoholic beverage. I think you'd hold some more of your team, of the team of people. If you've got a table of 10, there's always going to be that poor driver or that poor pregnant lady or that poor 100%. Athlete, and actually they could be nagging other people to leave. So this is a case of, well, if you keep everyone locked in, and me, I would drink a bottle of non-alcoholic wine, but if you put me somewhere where there was no option, I would let my soda water last the whole night.
True.
Because I can't be bothered drinking it.
Yes.
But if if the bottles are going round and I just happen to be grabbing mine the whole time, I would keep up glass by glass. So I actually think it's a benefit to having that on your range. I think it's going to be a really swanky thing to do. Why does your restaurant not carry non-alcoholic wine as the future?
Look, I think if you can market it properly and hit that price point and hit that point where it's not, and you get through them, it's not a fad. It's not this is actually now part of your total offer. I think you'll be hugely successful. I don't see anything holding you back from someone who's grew up in the industry. I was living in pubs till I was 24. And that's because my parents owned and ran them. So I saw the good, the bad, and the very ugly that alcohol can do to you. I mean, yes, I drink, but some of the sights I saw by the time I was 18, I probably shouldn't have seen.
And I think that's the thing. I think that socially responsible element is coming up. I mean, you might have seen, well, certainly on the Current Affair in Melbourne, there was an article just last night about Endeavour Group, Dan Murphy's, basically encouraging, reselling of deliveries of alcohol to people, and one guy died. I mean, that's a sad story. But I think even people like Dan Murphy's would love to shift their image and say, well, actually, now we carry a whole bunch of non-alcoholics. And if they could make that same money delivering, then they'll deliver non-alcoholic as well. It changes the image for them too. Now,
with spirits, I was looking, you can call them something AF spirits, which I'll ask you what that is. Now, alcohol in spirits is used to draw the taste out of the juniper grapes and the hops and the barley and all that. How do you get non-alcoholic spirit and still get the taste? Because I love my Jack Daniels. I love a nice port. I love a nice scotch. How do you still replicate that?
So that would probably be a different process to the wines. The wines are using the wine and then they're withdrawing the alcohol, whereas the spirits are non-alcoholic. And so it's more about the profiles of those, juniper berries or the cinnamon flavors. The Sexy AF range, which is the range that we're talking about, that is actually has a different market aim, I guess. It's not trying to be the whiskey swirling sort of alternative. It's actually supposed to be mixed in cocktails, and it's supposed to hold up. The flavors are supposed to hold up really well
like a mocktail.
In a cocktail. Correct. So now I guess, and again, it probably is a completely new term, but now you would ask for a Sexy AF mocktail, a cocktail as opposed to a mocktail. So I don't just want a sweet drink. I want the complexity. So it's much more complex in flavor. So you can taste various flavors at the back and the front of your palate that you just don't get from a mocktail. And so that's what you're adding. You're adding those spices and that balance that I guess makes it a more adult drink, even to the mocktail. So although you can probably have Sexy AF on its own, and I love the flavors when I'm actually tasting for them, I find that I prefer them in a cocktail. Yeah.
So you're really not bringing in replacement wines and spirits. You're actually creating a whole new market.
That's right. Yes. And I think that's where the Sexy AF brand particularly, their market is to clubs and bars. And so we've actually been talking again to distributors because they know their clubs and bars best. And it's all about, it's a sexy brand. The label stands up. If you put that label in a bar, you will read Sexy AF from 10 miles back. Awesome. If you try that with other brands, not so much, right? So the whole point is for it to be very striking in a colorful, dark environment. It's not really your sort of sophisticated leatherman chair type look.
So I'm going to take you back a little bit to your original training about psychology. Now, one of the human needs is to need to be wanted. So in Australia, that can, if you're sitting there and everyone else is having a beer or a wine and you're not, you don't feel part of the group. Do you think creating a range and supplying a range that is non-alcoholic, but a young girl or a guy who may be driving or not well can sit there and still have a glass of red with their friends and feel as though they're part of it? And that's an important part of being, I'll say, an Australian.
You are on the money. If you want to know why I think this will work, is because all the marketing already exists. If you look at marketing of alcohol beverages, look what you're looking at. You're looking at the barbecue. You're looking around the pool. You're looking at people laughing. You're looking at, in fact, they're not advertising their brand, their product, because that would be the drunk person. And they don't advertise that. What they advertise is the lifestyle. And that is easily done without the toxin in your body, honestly. And look, I'm even thinking... Or the hangover. I'm thinking, think Melbourne Cup is coming up, right? Think of those gorgeous ladies that look beautiful at the beginning of the night. My message to them would be, I know, you know where I'm going with this, right?
I do.
My message to them would be, have your champagne or two. I'm not against a couple of drinks, but then switch to a gorgeous Sexy AF cocktail. Still look gorgeous with your gorgeous glass, because that's the other thing is, I think restaurants and venues have missed the mark. All soda drinks are in ugly glasses. I, as a woman, do not want to drink out of a glass this thick.
No.
I want to drink out of a really fancy looking glass. It needs to be crystal, would be lovely too. And so what my proposition is, at the end of the day, the bottles need to look that good that no one actually looks at the volume alcohol content. That is nobody's business.
No.
You're bringing in your glass, or you come into a barbie, you come into, even to your friend's barbecue, you've got your wine. No, I'll just grab mine. All good. You don't even have to have the conversation, this one's non-alcoholic. And so you do feel part of it, and you don't feel like, the unicorn or the boring person. I mean, I think that's the biggest issue, is that it's considered absolutely boring if you don't drink. And then you have to deal with that awful conversation, why don't you drink? And really, does that mean I'm sober, or does that mean I have a problem with alcohol? No, none of the above. I just don't want to be plastered by the end of the night.
Yeah. And especially we do have to. I mean, I grew up in a time where drinking was very heavy, and you drank Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You went to work to sober up and start it all again.
You drank at work too to keep up with the boys?
Yes. Well, Fridays we went to lunch, and And then if you look back at all of your bad decisions in life, you can just about 95% link them to alcohol is somewhere within them. And look, it's all part of growing up, and we learn from them, or we hope we do.
But remember, we also, and I was part of that team too, we also were the smokers. So I would be, hanging around with the boss, and we'd go for smoke breaks, and I'd make my best sort of moves up the corporate ladder, smoking with the boss. So these things are changeable. And I think I see it in the same light. I see it as, alcohol will always have its place, but I think we need to pull back on how much we're consuming, because it is having some nasty consequences.
Have you been given, or anyone put out any figures on what percentage of the beverage market the non-alcoholic offerings could actually grab?
Apparently by 2024 it should be going up by 31% in terms of market growth. So it's grown by about 5. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah,
you asked me volumes in dollars.
Be about 5% at the moment?
Yep. So think 31% by 2024. That's a fair growth.
Yeah, I think, I suppose the health benefits and,
well, actually, Dan Murphy's teamed up with, Drinkwise, which is, they do scientific sort of studies and what have you. And I guess that's why I say I don't think in certain circles, it's actually not that new. It just seems to be new to I mean, my family is hilarious. I grew up, as you say, I drank at 15, I was clubbing at 15, alcohol was in my world. And my mum was the first to go, what are you doing? Like, who would do that? So I totally get it. But I do think that once you see it as, I'm not trying to give up alcohol, I'm not trying to have an ugly flavor, I just want to do something a little bit different. I think that's when it's like having a different tea. So now we have Earl Grey, whatever.
So the Australian Immigration Department haven't rung you to review your citizenship, saying this person is no longer worthy of being an Aussie? And
no, but they do give me a runaround about my ingredients because, funny enough, alcohol gets away with murder. They don't have to list nearly as much as I have to list on my bottles.
You're a natural product.
Well, I'm a food, so I fall under the food category. Whereas alcohol, I don't think they list any of the poisons they pop in there.
The ones in Australia, it's a very grey situation. When I used to work for a major brewery, and one of their biggest sellers was the actual byproduct of making beer.
Oh, really?
And they carbonized it, put it in a bottle. So it cost them next to nothing.
Wow.
And it's no longer made, but at its time, it was massive. And they added a couple of flavors to it, and off she went.
Yeah, you see, I think that's the thing. I think the whole point is for it to be an alternative that is adult palate worthy rather than just an alternative.
Because the organic wines haven't really taken off mostly because of taste, and people look at it and go, really? But when they look at beer is actually organic because it's the purest water you can get. It's cleaner than the tap water. And when I used to go in and have a look around the brewery, the rules and regulations about brewing beer are massive, and the heat generated kills just about everything.
Okay, there you go.
So it is a very pure way of making a very nice beverage that I enjoy immensely. But when it comes to wine and that's very much open to, you don't know what's being sprayed, you don't know what's in the ground, and it can be a little hit and miss. And I think we're lucky in Australia that our rules and regulations are the toughest in the world.
Still lacking in the alcohol area, I would say.
Yeah, I think from what I'm told with wine, they're getting a lot stricter.
Yeah. Look, you probably know more in terms of that, because that actually never been my industry. I guess I'm just talking from the perspective when I look at what my bottle has to say, and I grab my, because we've got a bar and it's got both alcohol, non-alcohol, and I look at the next one, I'm like, really?
What's that?
Does it even tell you, what's in there? No.
So in 12 months, what do you think is going to be your biggest challenge?
Balancing importing and making sure we've got stock. I think the big challenges at the moment are shipping, containers, access to containers, and so the time delay. So I guess, most times, so we ship from Canada as well. We're looking at least 40 days on the sea in transit. So if there's suddenly a boom on something, making sure that I can keep up. Nearly
a 3-month turnaround.
So projecting, in your first year, you would know, first couple of years, projection is hard. What are the fast lines? What are the slow lines? There's best before dates on everything. Yes. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I guess that's my biggest worry is, making sure that those ships arrive and we don't get delays at ports.
So where are you getting most of your product from?
Just 2 countries at the moment, South Africa and Canada.
Yeah. And do you think you'll ever range any Australian products?
Don't know, because I think there's going to be lots of players, and I'm just one fish of many. I think the way we've positioned ourselves as a company is that we want to have highlighted brands. So our brands we have sole distributorship for.
Awesome, good idea.
So high volumes in those brands would be good, and obviously being able to really focus on a brand in each category and making them the hero. I think I'll leave it to the retailers and the stores to have the range. I don't know if we'll ever have a huge range.
Yeah, so you'd rather have a range that sells in a broad range than be stuck with turnover or stock that just sits there and gathers dust.
Well, you're buying SKUs and SKUs and SKUs worth. Yes. And so it doesn't make sense buying smaller quantities from overseas because of the shipping costs. So it means it's a win-win, because if we're distributing their product all over the place, they're happy. They don't have to deal with fewer people in the Australian market. They have to worry about less, smaller orders. So from that perspective, it works both ways.
So what's your favourite wine you've got at the moment on the books?
It does have to be the red, the Almost Zero red.
Yes.
I'm a red drinker, and so I love the flavour.
So what's it like, a Shiraz, a Grenache?
It's more of a Merlot, actually.
Okay.
So a little bit heavier and deeper than, I guess, the traditional non-alcoholic reds available. And I guess that's probably why I liked it so much.
So if a young lady came up to you now and said, oh, Kirsten, I'm looking at opening my own business. I want to import X, Y, and Z from overseas. You've just started it. What advice would you give me?
How young did you say this person was? Because I'd say you need money.
Say they're a 26-year-old influencer on Instagram and haven't been in the real world.
I would say start somewhere else. Only because you do need money to, I guess, I can compare a product versus a non-product selling business. So psychology is not product-based. And that's an easy business to sell, except for the fact that it's capped at how many hours of the day there are. So that's, the benefit is easy to do. I don't need to put much money into it. But a 26-year-old, have they got the money to import? If they do, go for it. But if they don't, be careful, because that's the point. You don't want to run out of stock, because you don't get your income returned to you immediately like you would on a service-based industry.
So undercapitalization of someone starting out in business would be very important.
Correct. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's been great. Now I'm going to be a little bit mischievous.
I was waiting for that.
I've booked you a lovely meal down at St Kilda, and I brought in a nice bottle of Cab Shiraz from the McLaren Vale. And I said, you know what? I'm going to invite two people, anyone in the world, to sit down and share and discuss the non-alcohol versus the alcohol wine business. Who would you bring along? This always gets people thinking, because they don't know this question's coming.
I know who I'd bring just to have a general discussion. I don't know how much information they know about non-alcoholic. I wouldn't mind speaking to Walt Disney.
Yeah,
actually, I just thought he was an interesting character. I loved his vision. I loved his fun. He was not a nice person. I know that. I think he probably was Asperger's. That would be my, if I was going to label someone, that would be my label for him. So I would like someone fun like that. And I would then also, and I don't know how the two would mix, but I would probably go with Nelson Mandela, because having lived through the apartheid years, having seen a man who had spent 27 years in prison and come out as lovely and forgiving and really, to the white man, really quite kind. He could have come through with a lot of hate.
Yeah.
He really turned many South Africans around, because those that were, racist, he changed that. And so, how does one do that? How does one spend 27 years in prison and not come out with hate? Yeah.
Oh, how true it is. Look, it's going to be an amazing story. I'm going to put it out here now. I want to talk to you in 12 months.
Okay.
When you've been going for 12 months and you're sitting in your big mansion at Toorak. With,
excellent.
It's been a mega success, and we're going to find out exactly how you did and what you did.
All right.
If people want to find out a little bit more about your business, people want to find a little bit more about non-alcoholic wines and that, where do they find you?
So that would just be at www.pointzerosellers.com.au. Sellers as in the seller with a C, not S. And then same goes for Instagram. I'm probably more on the fun side of Instagram.
That's good.
So some funny bits there. And I think I'm on Facebook too. So yeah, all of them are Point Zero Sellers. Point Zero Sellers is the handle, they call it.
That's absolutely fantastic. Look, it's been great talking to someone who is very different to most of our guests.
Awesome.
Absolutely back themselves are making a success. I absolutely love it.
If I don't, who will, right?
Well, that's what people have got to do. Sometimes you've got to pull the Band-Aid off. I like the people who work on the burn the boat scenario. Just get there, burn the boats, and then we've got to stay here and invade.
That's right.
I think it'll be a roaring success. I think it's amazing what you're doing, and I think the health side of it is the benefits from it are going to far outweigh any of the naysayers and the do-gooders that might say, we shouldn't be doing it. I think it's brilliant.
Thank you. Would you like me to send you a bottle as a courtesy?
I have no problem with that at all.
What would be your flavour?
I like a nice red, so,
Okay, there you go. Thank you very much.
And so what we do at the end of all of our podcasts, we say, everyone, have a groovy day.
Have a groovy day.